Hi there, I'm Dr. Lisa Yeagers, and I'm here to talk with you today about community practice. I'm in London and going to share with you many examples as I walk around the community and enjoy the sights. So this video is going to start out with me giving you an overview, and then we'll break out into the community. I apologize in advance for some of the audio as I'm moving about in very loud spaces, but I'm enjoying the sun here in London today, which I've heard is unusual. So I hope you enjoy it with me.
Did you know that occupational therapy practitioners can work in jails or with people seeking housing or with agencies who are designing programming to facilitate the design of city planning, new parks, or with engineers who are developing new manufacturing lines and seeking ergonomic ways to set up workstations? I'm here to tell you more about this and how occupational therapy practitioners work in the community to design programs for health and well-being. Perhaps you're an occupational therapy student who's looking for learning more about community practice and how OTs work with different agencies and people in the community. Or you could be an existing practitioner who is seeking a new area of practice, perhaps outside of the more traditional hospital setting. Or you could be a high school student who is seeking degree programs and looking for ideas about where you'd like to go to school and what type of degree you may pursue. So I'll give you an overview of what occupational therapy and community practice looks like, and hopefully it'll provide more of an overview so that you have a good idea of the diverse and very broad areas where OTs can serve the community. My name is Dr. Lisa Yeagers, and I'm a health promoter, professor, researcher, and occupational therapy practitioner, and also an advocate for health and well-being. I value your time and have placed bookmarks in this video so that you can fast forward to any of the topics that may be of interest to you. And I appreciate you joining me today and hope you find this information valuable for your knowledge about occupational therapy and community health. When I say practitioner of occupational therapy, I mean for occupational therapy assistant, OTA, and occupational therapist, OT. For both of these types of practitioners provide services in very complementary ways in the community. So put together those people who have completed their degree, we refer to them as occupational therapy practitioners. So a couple of formalities. When we talk about occupational therapy in the community, there are a few different job titles that might be used. For instance, a community health advocate who works at the community level. A person could work as a consultant, providing expert advice, often during program development. Occupational therapy practitioners can also serve as case managers who look at the provision of different services and coordinating those services, linking people to different community resources, and serving as advocates or assisting with their independent activities of daily living. The OT practitioner may also work as a private practice owner or an entrepreneur and design their own business and offer services through their own community-based clinic. Also, the OT practitioner might be a supervisor and responsible for a team. They can train and evaluate staff and oversee programming for which they may have helped to design or develop based on needs assessment. And they may serve as program managers and can work even more closely with program developers or lead program development using community-based needs assessment and develop out the functions of the community-based organization and evaluation of a program. Let me give you an overview of what some of these practice areas look like. Here's sort of a laundry list of examples to give you an idea, and then I'm going to go out in the community today and show you specific examples in real life. So for instance, disaster preparedness is an area where a community may be touched by a tornado or an earthquake or something out of our control. We can assist with disaster preparedness, response, and recovery to those tragic events, especially trauma, and addressing recovery from the trauma that occurs from the everyday life being disrupted from that event.
So greetings from London. I am on my way to the Underground tube station to do some sightseeing today, and I thought that I would video some examples of what community practice looks like in an urban area while I'm out and about. So while I am typically in the US, it just so happens it was more convenient for me to make this video while traveling in London, and I hope you enjoy it. One of the areas that I walked through yesterday was in the city region and included the criminal courts of London. And I took photos of that because I wanted to show an example of how occupational therapy can be involved in criminal justice activities to promote the prevention of incarceration, reduce incarceration, and work with individuals looking for a new path as they return to the community from being held in jails and prisons. So the community courts represent this work that OTs can do in criminal justice reform.
In the U.S. and St. Louis, occupational therapists work with people experiencing incarceration and work with them to transition from jails and prisons to the community. Furthermore, we work with correctional workers to reduce their risk of injury.
Another video shows many aspects of city planning, urban planning, public space planning. As I'm walking through the tube or underground of London, walking the streets, you'll see many aspects of this and how we can look at universal design, accessibility, and ensuring that everyone is able to use the spaces, access spaces.
Doing the things that we need and want to do on a daily basis is so important, and I've seen such great examples of community mobility here in London. For instance, this person uses a small scooter to move about, and I'm seeing great curb cuts, tactile options in the curbs to know when a person is at a different transition, great signage and audio alarms and visuals to show when it's safe to move about. So great job in many of these spaces. However, later I will show you some examples of spaces where it's nearly impossible for people of all abilities to move about. While moving about in the London Underground, there are many options of accessibility and some options with universal design. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but there are definitely signs that there's awareness and promotion of accessibility throughout. This is an example of one of the escalators. However, there were elevators or lifts. One of the biggest challenges I see are the transitions. One of the main famous sayings in London is mind the gap, and it's because there are literally different heights of gaps when you move in and out of the subway trains. This is an example of one of the tourist areas and getting onto a boat. Definitely some ramps being used. And this is the second floor of an open air bus. This would be one of the limiting spots where only some people could get to the second floor because there is no way for someone who fully uses a wheelchair to move up to that top floor in most cases. The Piccadilly area is what I'm looking at here, and it is quite busy and loud and a lot of movement and things going on. The opportunities for public space planning and OT interventions here are endless. I think this next example was genius. There are so many ways that we can adapt and modify activities. And in this case, the person was transporting their musical instrument, but utilized a rolling cart to reduce their risk of injury. And you can see it here now. This is such a great example of how occupational therapists can be creative and help individuals of all abilities. In this case, a musician who needs to transport her harp from or through the tube system into the theater or performance area that she's going. Her ability to play the harp as long as she wants is maximized by this ergonomic intervention. So I provided some examples of different hospitals in the area, and those represent the transition or the evolution of how occupational therapy began with foundations in the community. However, we shifted more to a medical model in about the 1940s or so and through the 1970s, and now we have more of an emergence of community practice.
We need occupational therapists practicing not only in hospitals but also outpatient settings and community settings. And one way to involve community practice is through the primary care approach, working with physicians and making recommendations to improve activities of daily living. I wanted to take a break and give you a few community practice areas that I don't have video today, and that includes earlier intervention programs, school to community transition services, aging in place, driving and community mobility, low vision services, working career transitions, mental health programs in the community, addressing the needs of people who are unhoused, looking at telehealth methods, lifestyle redesign, and of course the list goes on and on. A couple of great texts that you can use as references on these topics include Occupational Therapy in Community-Based Practice Settings and Occupational Therapies Without Borders, which is more of an international perspective. Both of these texts are available on Amazon. Another area where OTs can work on community and population health is through workplace health. And so if we look at the many trades that are involved in not only construction, but also mechanics and keeping our trucks and cars and automobiles running, our facilities going in manufacturing plants and other industries, there's a huge amount of people who we can serve to look at more ergonomic practices, designing jobs to reduce risk of injury and overall improve safety and health. In residential, commercial, and government spaces, there are so many opportunities for OTs to contribute to the planning, the development, the design of the way work is being done to promote overall health, to reduce stressors, and to reduce risk of injury and promote safety and health. Here's an example of a safety meeting going on with workers at the bottom of a new high-rise building going up. And I've had the experience of working with construction and manufacturing trades to supplement the safety and ergonomic information offered in these types of settings. And thank goodness for all of those hard workers out there, especially the ones at the top of buildings who risk their lives every day to build spaces and create amazing places for us to visit. So I showed a lot of examples of great accessibility and planning in spaces, but as you may already know, London is a very established and long existing location, and some of the buildings were built here in the 1600s after the Great Fire of 1666. And here's a couple of examples of me trying to get through the space, which is hard for me, and I don't have any physical limitations right now, luckily, but for someone who does, that would be nearly impossible. The history, charm, and architecture of buildings in London are absolutely incredible. However, I just want to point out a couple of spaces that are examples of how things can be difficult to get through. For instance, these dimly lit stairs that are tight and cramped. I think I hit my head at the bottom here. These could be potentially retrofitted in ways to allow for more people to access them. However, it's totally understandable that sometimes there are limited options. You guys finding ways to work with space designers and people who will access those spaces, and creative ways to keep the aesthetics of the building and setting are ways that OTs can contribute to accessibility and universalism. Well, I hope this video has given you some insight into various areas of community practice and occupational therapy. While they may not seem as traditional as you might expect, I may also do a part 2 to this video to give you even more examples. Really, I could find examples in the community all day long, and I hope that you think of these as inspiring to consider even new areas of practice where OTs haven't yet explored. Thanks for joining me.
The history, charm, and architecture of London are absolutely incredible, and I highly recommend that you visit sometime. See more on my channel about occupational therapy, community health, professor life, and my research topics. Take care.